Welcome everyone to episode 14 of the Ethnically Podcast. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Elliott Daley. Elliott is an actor, author, playwright, director, poet, and teacher. Now, a little bit more about Elliott. He's an author of Winter Solstice, Precipice of a Dream, like I said, a playwright and a poet, and has run performances and writing workshops to inspire people of all ages for the past probably 14, 15 years. He's strongly passionate about the performing arts and creative expression, and is open and honest about engaging with audiences through characters of his own word. Elliot, it's great to have you on today's episode of the Ethnically Podcast. How are you feeling?
It's great to be here. Thank you very much. I was saying, I feel really good. I've had a good night's sleep, first time in a little while. I'm on a cool podcast, and the rest of my day I get to chill with my family. So
Yeah.
yeah, a
Oh,
good one.
sounds like a brilliant start to the day, brilliant day ahead. And yeah, no, it's great to obviously connect with you because we met at Queen Mary for an ICANN event, basically speaking
Mhm.
to students, and we obviously connected and resonated there. Um, you did an amazing sort of spoken word piece, which we'll get into in a bit. But if you could tell me a bit more about yourself, your background, and what kind of made you want to start working in the performing arts and that
Yep.
desire,
Yeah.
poetry and artistry.
So a few things really, but to boil it down, I had real difficulty reading and writing as a child. I remember all my friends, they seemed to get it just as kids do, usually. And I had no particular difficulties in terms of dyslexia or anything like that. So there was no real understanding of why I wasn't able to read and write. But I specifically remember in class, the teacher once said, "Can anybody spell is?" And my hand flew up. It was my time. Anyone, I can spell is. I, Z. The whole class burst out laughing. I'm thinking, what? I sounded it out. I did everything, you're supposed to do. And that didn't work. People are laughing, not horribly. It's funny,
Mm,
I got it wrong. I didn't take it offensively. I was just, oh wow, how
mm.
did I mess it up again?
Yeah.
But it made me hungrier to learn it, to get it right. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm gonna write a book one day. I had only planned to write one. Since then, thankfully, I love to write. But I remember I'm gonna get this, and that coupled with the fact that my mum was a theater actress, and there were a few times my school went to the theater, and I could point on stage and say, "That's my mum."
Yeah.
And then one of my friends would say, "Yeah, we know. We saw her at parents' evening. I've been to your house or whatever." But I just got to say that's my mum. And these challenges and inspirational moments really sent me on a path for literacy and performance. I love it.
Oh, it's amazing. No, it's good. I feel like, yeah, that combination of like your own lived experience of kind of like getting it wrong in class and kind of wanting to prove people wrong,
Yeah.
coupled with like, yeah, family experiences and your mum being an actress. Like, would you say like like people like your mum and role models had a massive impact on sort of your initial drive to become an artist, and what
Yeah.
was that like?
Yeah, definitely. So, my mum's talent on stage, her presence, and the amount of fun she had, not just on stage, but preparing for it, was something we were able to connect on because I got that from her. Absolutely loved to perform. And I remember like she would help me learn my lines at school once I'd learned to read. And, we'd have a great time doing that. And seeing how much fun it was and the ability to connect with my mum like that made me go for it even more and really explore myself as an actor, different kinds of character roles and texts. And, now I can read and I can be, I mean, like we all know the Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland. That is who I wanted to be. You just put on a different hat, become a different character. And now I could read all these characters. That's all I had to do. Read it, be it, fun. So that, and then now that I get to teach that as well is absolutely amazing, especially since I didn't think that would be part of what I ended up doing, the teaching side. So
Yeah.
that's
No, that's amazing. I think it obviously like had a massive impact and sort of being around that environment as well, which I guess is kind of how you started your initial career as well. So maybe it'll be really interesting for our audience if you could like break down. Obviously, we said earlier, but you went to Queen Mary,
Mhm.
like the journey from university to starting out to getting your first performance and how that
Yep.
and your whole. I don't want to say your whole journey.
Whole journey.
You've been
Yeah,
here
I
forever,
can
but
go.
done so many amazing, but
Mm,
like some of the key highlights and milestones that kind of that have got you to where you are today.
cool. Um, since leaving QM, I had no idea what I was gonna do. I enjoyed my time there, but my reason for going to university was because I wasn't ready to get a job. And I love learning. So put those two together. You don't, I mean, depending on your fees and everything, the cost of living today and the fees today are completely different from what they were when I went to university. Hopefully, I'm older than I look. And so, you know, but I didn't have to have a job at that time. And so after university, suddenly having to have a job and not going to university to prepare me for a job, I went to university to avoid work. I didn't really know what I was going to do. And so I went to Barcelona for a bit and I started teaching basketball to kids out there because that was fun. And that's what I wanted to do that, thought that'd be cool. But it wasn't really a career path. It was for the summer. So I came back and didn't really know what I wanted to do. I started working in HMV and in Westfield. I was a Christmas temp, hoping to secure a job afterwards. I was in the games department, love games, absolutely love gaming, especially at that time. And so when people would come in around Christmas, what should I get for my brother? What should I get for my dad? What should I get for, what game should I get for myself? What's the latest, hottest, what console, this one or that one? I was like, this is my element, let's go. And, but I remember at the time, I didn't have enough money to both eat, not even well, but eat food and to take public transport to work. So I was skateboarding to work at that time and constantly at risk of losing my home because I wasn't making enough money. And so when I got ill when I was there, I ended up in hospital for a while, came out of hospital, went back to work as you need to do. And I wasn't kept after Christmas. I remember I had my interview, like to let you know whether they're keeping you or not after Christmas. I was a top salesperson. I was a top salesperson and I was smashing my department. And I come back as soon as I could after being ill. Of course, you're keeping me. I want to track to management. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And he said, you know what I'm going to say, don't you? I said, yep. He said, we're not keeping you. I said, I knew it. I didn't know that, but I
yeah,
had to play like I
yeah,
knew it. I had to keep that smile on my face. And I thought my home, let alone transport, let alone food. I'm now going to lose my home. What am I going to do? And I thought to myself after that day, I thought, okay, cool. If I can be on the verge of losing everything constantly, doing something for other people that I don't want to do. I wasn't getting paid like loads. I didn't get to play the games. I enjoyed it, but I was barely eating. So this wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. But if I can be on the verge of losing everything constantly doing this, I can risk everything to actually now pursue what I want to do. And so that's when I started to perform some of the poetry that I had been writing from, experiences in my life. And I started at the Lyrics Theatre actually, no, I started at, I think, Deptford Theatre on an open mic night. And I met some people from the Lyric Theatre there. And they said, would you like to perform at our open mic night? I said, yes, I would. I thought, okay, somebody's going to discover me doing this. Yeah. And I'm having a great time. So I go to the Lyric to perform some spoken word there. And the staff there said, have you ever thought about working with children? Yeah. And I was like, yes, I
yeah.
hadn't.
Like,
I hadn't. I didn't want to, but I needed to get paid. And so I was thinking, sounds like you're offering me work here. So yes, I'm the oldest of 5 brothers and a sister. I've been with young people my whole life. I loved helping to teach them things, to play with them, entertain them, and help them grow into who they want to be. And so I had some skills that I hadn't really thought about because they're my sibling. That's just what
Yeah,
you do at home as an older sibling. It's just life. And so, but this time I needed money. They asked if I had thought about it. I said yes. And I went on a mentorship program with them. And I would work with different professional artists, different disciplines, so like graffiti artist, an actor, dance, anything. And I was the assistant in the class because I had a good rapport with the young people and a good rapport with the practitioner. And so I could be the go-between. But I started there. I remember my first role was registering juices. Then they noticed I had a good rapport with the young people. And so I went up to mentor. And then after that, they were like, okay, cool. So DBS is all good. Yeah, obviously before that. And you've got really good rapport with the young people. You've been able to lead a few games and such along the way to, keep them from rioting in classes or whatever. Have you ever thought about teaching, what you do, spoken word poetry? I was like, no, but I think I could design a really good class after all the practitioner I'd met, all the games, all the different styles of leadership and teaching I'd learned from, and combined with the skills that I have. And I thought I could help awaken or utilize in other people. If you want to rap, if you're a poet or something like that, and you want to do it, well, me too. So let's do that. And I started teaching spoken word there. Then I started teaching drama as well. So my drama background. Then I would start doing that in schools in the local area, like Phoenix School, like quite a few of the schools around there, just to uh, I had the skills. The lyric theatre would hired me then as a full-time practitioner and would send me out to the local schools, so for their community work. I got to go into the schools, do drama clubs, do poetry clubs, etc. Built on there. In 2012, I was performing at the Olympics because they were looking for talented people, and one of my friends at the Lyric put me on to the auditioning process, and I was like, okay, wicked. I tell all these young people about performing all the time. I perform in open mic nights, but I want to do something with this myself. And here's an opportunity for me. I auditioned with thousands of other people. They whistled it down from, I think, like, I'm going to say 3,000. I think somebody said 30,000, but I don't know. So if it could have been, that's nice. But I'm
Yeah,
going to say 3,000. It
that's
got
it.
whittled down to 300 of us. And so, like, 1 in 10, I was very happy to be there, writing my own stuff, performing every day, meeting thousands of people at an incredible venue and occasion. And after that, went on to perform with some of my students on TEDx Youth, like getting them ready either dramatically. One kid did a monologue, absolutely wicked. The other kid had his own poetry that he'd written, his own original poetry, and he's overcoming his stage fright and performed in front of such an amazing audience. So I from performing myself to my students performing, my students writing, I journeyed to a place now where you mentioned my book earlier, Winter Solstice. And so here's that, Winter Solstice, Precipice of a Dream. It's about an assassination attempt on Santa Claus. And I say it now because I want to show you a couple of pages. Like my writing journey went from, like I said, not being able to write to writing this insane story. Rather than simply complaining about the difficulties of Christmas, I wanted to create something special. See, here's my Rudolph there. And no, but this is beautiful as the story and artwork are. This is an assassination attempt, and this is about bloody vengeance. And they're really going for it for their own reasons, but reasons I think we can identify with in society.
Yeah.
The difficulties of toxic capitalism, as well as the Christmas present that is Christmas, which has been wrapped up in a lot of deception and toxic capitalism. I mean, I've not seen a birthday cake on Christmas, and Jesus and Santa don't share mince pies. You know what I mean? There's a lot going on with this, and a lot of history, a lot of, like I say, religious deception. And I've had a great time writing that. And the reason I bring that in where I have is because as part of my writing journey, I'm getting my students to write as well. What I realized as a writer is that I wanted to open my own publishing company to bring that access to publishing to those same students and people that don't often get that access. I remember my own journey to publication. I'm published with a company like that, that's fun, definitely. But the difficulties along the road to get there, the hurdles you have to jump through when the book doesn't change. I'm not saying those hurdles aren't worth it, but the book doesn't change. So if you've got a special book and you don't know how to access, because without a literary agent as well, some of these things are incredibly difficult. And if you can't access that well, Well, I often work with people writing incredible things, and I wanted to give them the opportunity for them to end in published works, as well as for anyone else who's not necessarily in one of my workshops or courses. If they simply wanted to publish a book and it's a book I can get behind or the team can get behind, yeah, we want that, you know? And so my journey from writing, from difficulty to writing to becoming a playwright, poet, an author, to a publishing house for, yeah, to promote access and literacy. I think
Mhm.
these things are incredibly important and incredibly powerful. I think I went kind of all over the place, but hopefully there was an answer to your question in there as well. Yeah.
Oh, no, Elliot, that was brilliant. I think,
Y-
first of all, I'd like to say, like, you're a huge inspiration. I think your story, I could resonate a lot with it.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people listening would. Um, First of all, like the difficulties you had sort of with work and sort of coming back to work from an illness and being told
Yeah.
you're not gonna need
Yeah.
work. I mean, that I'm not gonna go into my own experiences, but I've had a similar experience to that. And it's not nice. It's a horrible feeling, and
Yeah.
you kind of I really like what you said when you're basically at a stage where you let's risk everything for what I'm passionate about. That's
Yeah.
I guess for you, that was the decision that kind of transformed your whole entire life, and
Exactly.
back on that decision and like, that was the best decision I've ever made. Because,
Definitely.
like you said, being able to perform at the Olympics, help young people,
Mhm.
help your own publishing company, those are all things that, yeah, like, I mean, that to say you've done all of those things
Mhm.
from where you've come from and what you've done is a testament to yourself and the
Thank
person. Um, no, it's amazing. It's honestly, it's incredible. And like one of my questions that I prepared for you actually was about, obviously, playwriting, poetry, and writing itself, like that whole process for you. What kind of goes through your head when you're creating a piece? Because, like you said,
you.
so many lived experiences that you've had, that other people have, that the young people that you work with have had as
Yeah.
well. So what process do you have for yourself when you
Mhm.
draft those pieces and create those pieces? But also, do you teach to other young people at your workshops, at
Yeah.
your facilities, for example?
So that's a really interesting and cool question. Thanks. So when I'm writing myself, it depends what I'm writing. If I'm writing a story, whether it be a play, opera, anything, if it's a story, I like to create the characters first, find out what the characters want, and know them as much as possible, even the most random details from their favorite color to their least favorite food, because whether or not they're religious, because if they are religious, what religion? Because that will color some of their thinking and give different philosophies and a culture. And if they are not religious at all, then it's easier to know how they would react in certain conversations. If a religious conversation comes up, maybe they want to leave it because they don't want an argument. Maybe they want to share where they're coming from as well. Maybe they're not interested. They think it's all nonsense. But the more I know about them, the more situations can freely come up within the narrative that I don't have to think, what would you do? It's kind of obvious what you would do because of who you are. We have a really good idea of how our friends would react in certain situations because we know them. Like we could take Bart Simpson out of The Simpsons and put him in EastEnders if we wanted to, and still know what he was going to do. You know, skate across the bar and, you know what I mean, the pub and wherever, go have a cow, man, eat my shorts, because we know him so well. So for a story, once you know your characters, it's hard it's harder for me not to be able to write than to have to deal with a writer's block, because this is the situation, this is who they are, this is what they want, this is what they can do. If they got super strength, put them in cuffs and those cuffs are done. If they don't have super strength, suddenly they're in cuffs. Can they pick locks? If you know they can't pick locks, what are they doing? Either they have good negotiating, con man skills, wherever they're gonna trick the guard, whatever, who are they? What do they want? What can they do? What's the situation? And it almost, for me, writes itself. It still takes a lot of energy and imagination, but it's not what would they do. It's what's
Mhm.
the situation, and then they'll tell me what they'll do. So that's for stories. For poetry, um, depend. If I'm writing like a political piece, I've got to know my subject. If it's about history, politics, I've got to know my subject. If it's an emotional piece, I have to accept the I want to say reality, but my perception. I have to accept my perception and then explore it, and then write my rubbish. In any case, I have to write my rubbish. And the reason I say that is because rarely, in my experience, and in the experience that is told to me from many people I've worked with, do I feel entirely happy about what I've written the first time. But if I don't get that first draft out, I can't then chip away at it, edit the words, and find um, the correct words to do my inspiration justice. So if it's a poem about my own emotions, I have to explore my perception, as I said. If it's a story, I have to know the characters. And either way, I've got to write my rubbish because I could be like, no, 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 not that. And then I could fix it up. That as well as planning. I think planning is really important in terms of where you think the story is going, but
Yeah.
I don't necessarily have to stick to the plan. This is where I think it's going. This is where it makes sense it's going. This is where it went. But as long as I have that initial framework, then I can add to the bones or break those bones and, you know what I mean, put some new ones in, replace that hip or whatever I have to do for the story. So yeah, that's kind of my process for myself. For other people, I tell them something similar. I think you should know your characters. Definitely, if you know your characters, you know what they're going to do more easily, and write your rubbish. Write it from an honest place. I remember one of my brothers. I won't say which one. I've got 5 brothers and a sister. I'm not gonna bait out which brother, but
Really?
he's a very talented poet, very talented. But his first ever poems were about, and he was a child, so you know we'll excuse him. They were about selling drugs in LA, and he'd never been to America. You know what I mean? Let alone sold drugs. That didn't happen either. You know, but he'd never been to LA, and this is his first thing. So me being a poet, my brother tells me he's written something. I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
right. You're
let's
excited.
hear it. And selling drugs in LA. I'm like, what? No, no, this
Oh,
didn't happen. You know what I mean? But, but when he wrote a poem a few years later, he's written many poems, but one of his poems called My Rhymes. And it was just about why he writes his poems. And it was so good. It inspired me. But more than inspired me, I actually wrote altered copies of his piece 3 times. And I showed it, and I was like, "No, no, no. No, this is yours again, isn't it? No, that's how good his was," and it got stuck in my head. Then I had to go away, really write mine, and then come back and say, "Okay, cool, now I'm ready." And he's like, "Yeah, yeah." But he went from the madness and, you know, the fabrications to something so true, I thought it was mine. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
that's
And
crazy.
so to see that journey in him and then to be inspired to then write the piece I then did write as well from it. I'm like, yep, yep, yep. Thank you. You're doing something special now. You know what I mean? But I mean, I think it's special. I know he's mad talented. So yeah.
Yeah. No, that's yeah, that's incredible. I think all of that sort of obviously the process of what you've gone through and what you do into creating your pieces and then how you inform and inspire other people to do it is obviously is incredible. I think that actually now that you've broken that down makes a lot of sense to me because and actually that concept of writing your rubbish, it
Mm,
actually if I think about it for myself in a complete different context, that's kind of similar to whatever you do. If you're like writing a business plan, for example, or doing any piece of work, you write your rubbish first because
yeah.
that's the first draft and you always
Hmm.
iterate with it afterwards. So I
Hmm.
really like the process and I think that's obviously a concept that a lot of people take and they apply it to whatever industry they're in. Um, I was going to ask what because I it kind of sounds like a very obvious question, but I'm asking because I want to sort of delve deeper into the topic. In terms of expression, creativity, and getting your message out there, why is poetry, writing, playwriting, acting, writing a book, why that form, why literature in general, why is that form you the most powerful way of expressing yourself and sort of relaying your authenticity and your message to the world?
Wow. Um, that's something I've thought of quite a bit throughout my life,
Mm.
and I enjoy the answer I've found for myself. And so I love martial arts. Yeah. Absolutely love martial arts. And as a practitioner, as a through my youth, I contemplated becoming a fighter. And you hear concepts like the pen is mightier than the sword. And I'm like, hold on, give me that sword though. You know?
Yeah.
No, we'll see. But but in terms of legacy, um, I think unless you're wielding Excalibur, and I think more people know about Excalibur than even potentially and Merlin than King Arthur. You know, many people know about King Arthur, of course, but I think more people have heard of Excalibur, in my experience anyway. And so while the sword was remembered, the man wasn't remembered as well, but with a pen. So I have a poem, and one of the lines is, well, I'll just say, if you don't mind, a piece about
Yeah, I'll go
why.
ahead.
This kind of explains why I write. They say the pen is mightier than the sword. So as my fingers constrict this weapon of mass destruction, I'm not surprised it wants a sacrifice. Virgin papyrus lies there begging to be defiled until blood-let droplets run from conscious streams and spray the page in uncoagulated imagination. The spattered patterns pool in sacrificial musing, weeping their crimson tears through pen-carved wounds to cry life into the vampire manuscript. Its undead fibers dance. Writhing, they bathe in the Incan silence, violently metamorphosizing into screaming hieroglyphs as this chrysalis of soundproof lines sonograms the astral body of my naked mind. They said the pen was mightier than the sword. No one told me it could tie my soul to the page, so that the fetus of my inner child could play for ages after I'm dust. No, they just never told me that. No, they never told me the ink. Well, the inkwells could play kidneys for the dialysis of my mind, or the parchment was a looking glass for the soul. No. They said the pen is mightier than the sword. For though a sword can sever limbs, or even kill a king, the pen ties my ether and breath so that even from death, I will be resurrected in syllable strings.
Wow, that was breathtaking. That was
Right.
amazing. That was
Right.
beautiful, man. Yeah. That
It just it just explains like why. So like, I mean, you could. I love Bruce Lee. I love Bruce Lee. I'm Hicks and Gracie. There's a few fighters. I'm not like go on, but for my legacy, and like Floyd Mayweather, for example, out of the ring, there's a lot I can't agree with. Yeah. Inside the ring, there's very little to disagree with, but he will never get the credit he deserves for the amount of times and the level at which he put his life on the line. Most champions in history he's defeated. And he's known as the most defensive fighter. Over half his fights are knockouts. He's, you know, they'll try and take his legacy away in any way they can.
Mhm.
So if I've written my own legacy, it cannot be taken away from me.
100%.
So it's that.
Yeah. No, so that explains why, like, being able to create your pieces and poetry that will last a lifetime, be it
Yeah.
years, is kind of that makes a lot of sense to
And
me.
beyond, you know, right? Like Shakespeare, we're still reading those. And thank goodness.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Great works from all around the world, like myths, the legends that have been passed on, the great historical deeds. When somebody writes their autobiography, that's me.
Mm.
You get to read people's minds quite literally by reading the words that fell from them. And people can live, yeah, you can live forever in pages as long as people have access to them.
Yeah. No, 100%. And now obviously with like the digital age and digital the
Videos, yeah, yeah,
everything, you can get access to everything.
exactly, exactly.
No, that's amazing. And that does make a lot of sense, I think, having that legacy in which you can bestow upon generations.
Mm,
Which kind of leads me sort of nicely onto our next question. Um, inspirations and obviously legacies that have gone on before, right?
mhm,
So I mentioned to you off the call that obviously it's Black History Month this October. And we've been well on Ethnically. We want to talk to Black people and their experiences and why being on Ethnically and being able to sort of inspire change is really important to them.
mhm,
So I wanted to ask, like, what were some of the inspirations that got you started in poetry? Was there any sort of artists or poets that you kind of resonated with the most? That's like a first question. And then the second part of my question would be in terms of Black history, what really spoke to you? What's the thing that really triggered a lot of those experiences and wanted to kind of make that change. And obviously,
Mhm.
for you in the community, what is the key messages that you want to sort of portray to everyone?
Nice. Okay. Thanks. First question, who inspired me poetically? Yep.
Yes.
So at first, it was a confrontation that inspired me to get into poetry. Not there were poets I liked and lyricists. Lauryn Hill, I think, is one of the most amazing lyricists and rappers ever in terms of her flow, her word choice, the eloquence with which they flow from her. Tupac, one of the most incredible storytellers. Biggie, his flow and just energy on the microphone, absolutely incredible. So they were huge. I won't say inspirations because it wasn't them that made me want to do poetry. In fact, I did not want to do poetry. It was definitely something I did not want to get into. But I did truly appreciate what they did. And when I started, when I fell into poetry, I looked again at them and I was like, okay, cool. So I got to find me. You're like this, you're like this, you're like this. I got to find me and who I am in this. But what got me into poetry, well, first, I have a love for words anyway. But I remember thinking as a child, and this was my immature thinking, regardless of whether or not it's true, this was how I thought. Girls don't like poetry. What's the point? I thought girls don't like poetry anymore. What's the point? That was
Right.
me at 8 years old. Yeah. That was me at 8 years old. I was like, what's the point?
Mm.
And then I mean, I like poetry. I have met lots of people, all genders that like poetry. I like poetry. So, but what got me in, eventually we're getting to the answer, sorry, was I was in a train station on my way to university and I wasn't really looking where I was going. And I bumped into a woman and I bumped into each other. And she immediately started shouting at me.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, whoa, this is definitely both of our faults. I could shout back at you or at least ask you to shut up. But I thought, then I'm going to look like the aggressive black man. Yeah, this is something I've heard of my whole life, Be
Yeah.
careful, Elliot. You don't want to seem like the aggressive black man. And I remember thinking and feeling that very powerfully in that moment. If I equate my energy levels to and tone with this woman's in front of me, I will then be thought of as the aggressor, and we've walked into each other. And if I say nothing, then I look like this guy who's getting put in his place because this lady's not taking it anymore. And so I thought to myself, like a sponge takes in water, so I've soaked up the abuse. And when that thought came into my head, I was like, oh, there's something there. These are my first poetic lines as an adult. And I was like, okay, there's
Yeah.
something there. And then I could no longer hear that woman because this poem was forming itself in my mind. And then after that interaction, on the way to university, I wrote that poem. I said it on the I Can event. And I was like, okay, cool. I want to do more of this. This has been an incredible way to express myself and to make me feel so much better about what had happened. And what else can I say with this? I think it's a lot easier to listen to people, or if you've got something to say, it's a lot easier to listen to people if it comes with a rhythm and some
Yeah.
sort of flair. And so people will listen to absolutely any subject if they can just enjoy the rhythm. I mean, we've heard some of the crazy songs that come out, which have great beats. So if you've got a great rhythm, great flow, people are much more apt to listen. And finding that I had this talent and this desire to communicate in this way, I was like, okay, cool. So what else do I want to say? And I started writing about my Xbox, politics, nights out, and whatever else. So
Yeah, no, that's hugely. It's crazy that one interaction. I guess as well, you obviously had other interactions that kind of sparked.
definitely many things had happened that then coalesced in that moment into me just expressing how I felt about them all. Like a
Mm.
sponge takes in water. I've been soaking up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was that. It was that. So that's what got me into poetry and some of my inspirations in the field. Definitely, when I entered the field, I was like, "Oh yes, I'm gonna look again at you guys because you got something from me." And so, what was the second question?
And the second part of the question was around sort of Black History Month and kind of what we spoke about
Yeah.
offline. Well, yeah, kind of like those experiences, kind of the message you want to send to the community, to people around Black history and kind of being an advocate. as well.
Love it. Thanks. So, there's so much in terms of Black history, from ancient African kingdoms, Axum, the Moors, the
Mm.
trade routes, all so much pre-slavery wealth of knowledge and stories, which I always prefer to start teaching about. Of course,
Yeah.
anything relevant within Black history, I think within history should be discussed, should be learned from. History is why we are where we are today. It's often called Black history, but there were definitely other races involved there, some of the points that we focus on today. And so I think it should just be history. However, my overall message is, I think if you know your history, you understand why you are where you are. And not only will that empower you, it can many times fuel you to make necessary changes or to prevent some things from reoccurring. Like, for example, um, the cycle of violence that I've seen in my community, in parts of my community. In some parts they are church elders and there's absolutely no violence at all. But it's know your history to understand why you are where you are, and understand the diversity of culture, because we're often told Black culture is this. No, there are parts of all cultures which have negative elements, and why do they exist? Rather than just ignoring it, that doesn't work. Rather than simply telling me that I need to dress a certain way so the police don't trouble me. No, no, no. What is the history of the police troubling people that look like me? Because these clothes are being sold right now. So if these companies are not getting any pressure from the police for selling these clothes, why am I getting pressure from the police for wearing certain clothes? And what is the history of that, so that when they approach me, I can address them despite how angry I often am I was almost arrested once for coming out of my house at 10 a.m. because I could be a burglar. I didn't run out of my house with a sack of goodies. I left my house and there were two police officers there, and I was almost arrested because I could be a burglar. And then I said, "Why? Why is it you think I could be a burglar?" "Because you looked surprised," he said. I said, "She looked surprised as well." A neighbor who just came out of her house. Yeah. "Well, we're talking to you, sir. Why aren't you talking to her if you're looking for surprised people?" You know, right? Can you put your key in the door to prove that you live here? Can we go to your house, put your key in your door and pretend and prove that you live there? Why are we doing this? Yeah. I'm on my way to work. And at that time I was working with young boys, young youth offenders. And I wanted to be able to tell them there is a way to deal with the police
Yeah.
politely, despite your anger. In oftentimes, so sometimes the police, many of them are just doing their jobs. I'm not against that, but I'm just living my life. And in order that both those things can happen as smoothly as possible, I am armed with the knowledge of history and how then to operate with the police so that they understand it isn't worth troubling me when I've done nothing wrong. Come for me as soon as I have. But when I've done nothing wrong, you have no indication I've done anything wrong. You just want to, "Oh, okay, cool. Let's talk to that one. He looks surprised." That's insane, and I'm gonna make you regret your morning. Definitely, in the most polite way. I'm just gonna make sure that you think, "Oh, if I see him again, it's not worth that." Not because I've been aggressive, not because I've been rude, but I've been so right. You have understood you're wasting your time dealing with me. Yeah. So if more of us are armed in that way, the police will deal with less of it. They'll be like, "No, it's not worth it. He's doing nothing wrong and you don't want to talk to him. He'll just get on your nerves." You know what I mean? Let's just find some criminals. That's the attitude I want from the police when they see me. And the more we are armed with these tools, that's what more of us will receive. "Oh, no, 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 no. Let's go find some criminals."
Yeah.
Wicked. Right?
Mm. No,
That's kind of my message there wrapped in.
no, like that does. Yeah. I mean, I could get into a whole. Actually, on one of the episodes I did with Shopna Begum, who's CEO of the Runnymede Trust.
Yeah, I saw that one. I read that, heard that one on Spotify.
Oh, nice. We were talking about the
Mhm.
policing system, and obviously the biases, and obviously, yeah, about like one of the pieces we were talking about policing in schools, and sort of the ability of police is just to go into schools and search kids, and
Yeah. Yeah.
basically kids that are minors, and no permission or
No
deep,
parents.
no care, no anything, and
Mhm, mhm.
like the culture around the police is something that in this country, I feel like, and probably I'll say Western countries in particular, have that negative connotation with communities like the Black community,
Hmm.
like the brown community, for example, as well. So it will, I guess, those experiences and that message as well informs a lot of your work today and kind of what you're doing today. You mentioned the publishing company as well.
Yep.
Again, I got a two-part question because
Hmm.
me, I
Yeah.
like part questions because there's
Nice.
one, you have the answer for the first part, and then you're thinking about the second one unconsciously. So that's why
Yep.
kind of it's a bit of a tip from me. But the
Nice.
first
Thank
part,
you.
the first part of my question is, um, with ethnicity, how does that influence your work as a writer and a performer? And I know you kind of touched on it already. Uh, and I say that because ethnicity forms a big part of what I'm trying to do with Ethnically. I want to speak to as many different people from as many different ethnicities, different backgrounds, different cultures, and sort of understand why they are where they are and how they got. So that's the first part of the question. And then the second part is kind of what you spoke about just now around like sort of informing youth and inspiring young people to sort of get on the right path. What do you see as the biggest challenge for that as well? When
Yep.
you
Okay.
try to inspire them and maybe it doesn't sort of click with them initially.
Yep. Okay. So the first part of that. So repeat that again, please. Ethnicity. How does that influence the
Yeah,
work? Thank you very much. Cool.
for
I
sure.
had an answer, but then I
For sure.
lost. So for me, that's really interesting because there are quite a few of my ancestors who are from different places. So, for example, my grandmother, who recently passed, her grandmother was a Chinese woman and her grandfather was a Scottish man. And they met in Jamaica, had a daughter who then met a black man in Jamaica and then, had my grandmother, you know what I mean? And so and on the other side, there's Irish and Scottish as well. So to start from a place like that led me to explore and try to understand different cultures. I was immediately interested in other cultures, but I definitely identify myself as a black man. Definitely, that's my lived experience. That's who I see in the mirror. That's who I love, as well as loving, my ancestry.
Mhm.
So for me, it was really important, that journey of experiencing other cultures and learning as much as I could about other ethnicities, as well as um, showing what I can of mine. And so in terms of my work, I create many black heroes as well as heroes from other cultures as well. So in the book Winter Solstice, the main protagonist is a black family. I won't say too much about what happened, but Santa rules a racist regime. It's not racist in terms of color, but in terms of races, because as humans, we are one race. But the elves are superior to the humans. So that allowed me to exorcise some of my, one of the ways I like to try and deal with racism. Humans should be together.
Mm.
If we end up having to combat another race, need to be less divided, So the elves showed the racism and they are of many colors as well, because they are still one race. And it's that. So creating black heroes, as well as teaching as much as I can about the truth of where we came from. I remember as a child, one of the sayings in the playground was ABC. You're an ABC. And that meant an African bottom cleaner. And exactly. So to hear that as a child, like my name is Elliott Ajai-Ajagbe Daley. Yeah. I'm African. My father's side is African. I love that history and ancestry, as well as my Jamaican and what I know of the Scottish, Irish, Chinese. Love it. But, like, I'm African. That's right here. I see my dad. You know what I mean? I seen my family. I know of that. I live it, as well as the Caribbean. And so to hear from these children in England, black children, you ABC to each other,
Yeah.
it's like, whoa, this has gone wrong.
Yeah.
And that comes from a place where we are taught as black people that we were naked in the jungles. Um, we were made slaves, which is unfortunate, but at least now we have clothes and technology. However, when you then study cultures like the Moors and find out that they brought and astrolabes to Europe, They taught algebra. That comes from the Moors. They brought that into Europe. And when you see Moorish jewelry, because the Moors were of many different races, but when you see Moorish jewelry, you will see traditionally African, sub-Saharan African noses, etc. And why create jewelry of not yourselves? This is, they were creating Moorish jewelry, and there's loads of images of it online. So please look for it if you want to know what they look like. It's right there. And to teach that many of the pharaohs were black. We're told that. I remember a teacher of mine at school said he said that Michael Jackson's "Remember the Time" video was Michael Jackson's attempt to be cool because we all know that the pharaohs weren't black. I said, actually, quite a lot of them were, sir. Yeah. He said, no, they weren't, Elliot. I said, no, they definitely were. Elliot, you're disrupting my class. Get out. Okay. I left.
Mm.
I went to the library. I printed off lots of information about, proving what I had been talking about. I went back. I knew this teacher. He had an incredible ego. He wasn't going to listen, but he tried to embarrass me, kicked me out for saying something that was true and lied about history. So I knocked on the door, said, sir, I'm ready to come back now. He said, okay, come back in. I walked in. I started handing out pieces of paper to the students. The students started reading it. What are you doing, Elliot? I made sure I got everybody their piece of paper. They said, he's right, sir. You know what I mean? They started reading about all these black pharaohs. He's right. Elliot, get out. Fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I made my point. You're not
Yeah.
gonna tell me about my history from a place of ignorance. I
Right.
say mine as a black person. For all I know, I have no Nubian blood. You know what I mean? That's another problem as well. Slavery has us so mixed up on the Caribbean, American, and English side, that often we don't know where we're from. And so to be able to teach about the kingdoms, about the technology, the philosophy that was happening across Africa, doesn't matter where you're from. There, there are, I think, more pyramids in, I want to say, we might have to edit this bit because I need to make sure. Sudan, yes, don't have
Yeah.
to edit it, keep it. There are more pyramids in Sudan than Egypt. And most people don't know that. So, oh no, the Egyptians had something special going on. Yes, they did. So did the people in Sudan. You know what I mean? And so to to make this history and knowledge known is incredibly powerful. And you get rid of that ABC stuff. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, and we can actually start to talk, oh, wow, well, this was going on in Africa. So they weren't naked and running around in the jungles. I mean, there were people who wore less clothes. Everybody wears less clothes when they go to Africa, I bet you. You
Mm.
know what I mean? I bet you like everybody's wearing less clothes. It don't make sense to have some of the suits that we now see people wearing in some places. It don't make sense to wear certain clothes in some places. And in other places, there were beautiful traditional garbs. Yeah, so, just to be able to knock out many of these lies with historical facts, with ancient artifacts that I can point to. I've done some work with Gunnersbury House Museum,
Mm.
and they have a wealth of historical artifacts from ancient African kingdoms. And to get to show these to students, no, 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 no. This is where you've come from. They want to show you chains until you came naked and then in chains and blah, blah, blah. No, 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 no. Before the chains, your people were working metals too. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot that I'm able to do with and through uh, this knowledge that I have. So I
Yeah.
make sure to share that.
No, that's brilliant. I think that's one of the key things as well. Is like demything what history is sort of bestowed and taught to us, especially
Mhm.
in this. I think the
Yeah.
curriculum, something I'm like massively passionate about tackling because it's decolonizing it essentially. And
Yeah. We're
obviously,
taught Churchill's a hero.
no,
For some he was, for some, you know what I mean? For others, he was a slaughterer. Let's
yeah,
just put it out there, you know what I mean? As you say, we are taught things.
mm,
History is framed in such a way because it's important to maintain certain power structures. And I don't mean racial ones. I don't simply mean that because even through slavery, many of the white people on the ships were forced to be there. Like, if you don't do this, then we're coming for your debts, and then they couldn't afford to support their families. I'm not saying they should have done what they did. They should have found the power, should have come up with an idea to do something else. What I am saying is many of these white people were also forced to be there, and in a very different way. In a
yeah,
very way.
very,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And you had also organizations like the Quakers, which are a religious sect. They're white people. And if you had, or they were then anyway, there's people of all colors in there now. But they said if you had a slave, you were expelled from the order. So there were allies. It's not as simple as black against white, but it is the same power structures that are still there today. And that's really important because otherwise we never deal with it. You've got a lot of people saying, I'm not racist, and they mean it. A lot of them are not racist. It just doesn't matter because you are not the power structure in the way. And you saying that it's getting in the way. Like if I say I'm not sexist, there is sexism.
Yeah,
No, like some of the numbers really need to be looked at, and we actually need to take a good, proper look at what's going on. But there are issues to deal with in both ways. You know what I mean? Women have some powers that can horribly affect men's lives, and men have some powers that can horribly affect women's lives, you know? So these power structures need to be looked at, and with the accuracy of history as much as possible. I wasn't there. But with as much as possible detailed research and a real look at it, we can say, okay, cool, this is why we are where we are. And how can we deal with it? You might not even necessarily be able to say, this is how we deal with it, but we could talk about it. This is why we are here. How can we deal with it? You know, it's a more open conversation and people feel less defensive because if we're told that it's this race against this race, no, it isn't. Yes, it is. No, you know, we're not going anywhere.
we're not going anywhere. Yeah,
Exactly. There are certain people within this race that have this agenda and they're racist. We need to deal with them. There are certain people that are sexist and we need to deal with them. You know what I mean? It's that. Because if you start telling me all men are sexist, I'm like, well, I'm not. I know my son won't be, you know. And so if you're just going to shout at me, I don't know how to help. If you're going to ask for an ally in the fight against injustices in general, I'm in.
Mm.
You know, I,
and
so,
that's what should be the messaging. And I feel like that's not sometimes what we get told or what we kind of want to enforce as well.
yeah.
Uh, and I think around the systemic issues and stuff, I think one thing that really infuriates me personally is like people would kind of say like, oh, racism. The one thing that gets on my nerves is racism isn't as bad as it was a few years ago, but it
But
still
we're
exists.
here though.
We're still here, yeah. And there's
Exactly. Yeah.
reasons why people don't get the opportunities, the recognition,
Hmm.
the get abuse that they should
Opportunity.
get.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Still, like, yeah, abundant in society, unfortunately.
Mhm, mhm.
Elias, this has been an absolutely like incredible listen, and I can listen to you all day. You know, I feel
Likewise, man. I've had a good time. Thank you.
I think it's been absolutely amazing. And there's a couple of other questions I want to ask before we sort of wrap up the podcast. Um, spoke to you offline about that spoken word piece you did
Mhm.
at the kind of event. I
Yep.
thought it was really, really powerful. Um, I wanted to ask if you were able to sort of repeat that piece and
Yep. Yep.
provide that for our listeners because I thought
Definitely.
it resonated with me, and I want to be able to for you to share that with
Thank you.
the ethnically audience.
Wicked. No, I'd love to. So, the piece is called Sponge, and I mentioned the situation that birthed it earlier. So, here we go. Let me take a breath. Like a sponge takes in water, so I soaked up the abuse. I did more than grin and bear it. I would smile and wear it. Turn the cheek and make a good eye blind to it. I would take the hit and lay struck like a match, while the fuse of my soul was lit. Silently burning, my yearning for the path I saw was true, trying to follow that yellow brick road whilst walking on a tightrope of tedium, all the while in a haze of the purest rage. For every 2 steps forward, I'm shoved 5 steps back by a society trying to label me. Wearing a hoodie in the winter, I'm a thug. But when I went to buy that hoodie, I was a customer. But that's the world in which we live. Wordplay, take it, accept it. I tried to take it, but I can't accept it. And now I need to make it the way I need it to be, and that's just equal. A better place for every race to come together as one and drink in God's grace. Thank you.
That's amazing. That's yeah. I mean, it was so beautiful hearing the first time at the event, and to
Thank
hear it kind of reinforcing that message. And it's such a beautiful piece, and yeah, I just want to thank you once again for sharing that.
you.
Elliot,
Oh, thank you.
we're on to the last segment of the episode, and didn't tell you this before. I like a bit of surprise. That's
Cool. I'm
amazing.
scared.
You said you've listened to some episodes, so you might know about this.
Yeah.
You is I get my previous guest to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Get to ask a question for my next guest on the Ethnically podcast. So your question is actually you're going to be like, "Oh, Adarsh, you came up with this question." I actually didn't. It was Karan who came up with this question, and his question was to you: Why are you on the Ethnically podcast?
Love it. Um, well, if I hadn't been invited, I would have spoken to you until you invited me because I wanted to be here. So there's that. But I'm here to share not just what I do, but what I want to do. And like I said, I want to help people access their literary gifts, their literary wishes, and publish their works so that we can read more minds and more hearts. I'm here so that people know what I'm doing. My company is called Pyro's Publishing and Literary House. We'll be publishing our first books in January, and look out for us because we're looking out for you. I mean, we want you guys. That's why I'm here to share my story and share as many stories as I can through what I do.
No, it's amazing, and I'll definitely put a link to where you can speak to Elliot and get in touch with his publishing company as well. When the episode is released. But yeah, no, that's brilliant, and yeah, you've more than shared your story. You've shared it in a way that's more beautiful and poignant than I think a lot of people would have shared their story. So I want to
Thanks.
thank you for that. Um, your chance to ask a question
Yeah.
around the theme of ethnically, what we discussed today, speaking to different cultures, ethnicities, systemic issues. Along those themes, what sort of question would you like to ask my next
Yeah.
guest?
So my question, I think it's really important to know whose people's heroes are. So I would like to know yours as well, but who their heroes are. I think that says a lot about who we are and what we aim to do.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'll ask you first if you don't
Oh,
mind.
oh, nice. Yeah. Who's my hero? My biggest hero. There's a lot to be honest. Well, I'll say a lot.
Love it.
There's like
Who's the first one that came to you and why?
first one. Okay, this is gonna sound quite weird, right? But I'm a
Good.
massive football fan,
Mhm.
and my first hero I can just imagine was like I'm a Liverpool fan. I don't know what if you follow football.
Man United.
Oh,
It was
so
all going so well.
thanks, Noel. Oh,
I'm gonna pretend you didn't say it. Don't worry. Don't worry. It's cool.
but my hero was Steven Gerrard. So, and like I kind of resonate with him because he obviously wore his heart on his sleeve and kind of he led in a
He
different
was a
way.
worthy foe.
He was a worthy, yeah, he was a worthy opponent, someone that you could identify with if
Mhm.
you didn't. He was someone who obviously came from not the greatest background as well, and like in terms of his upbringing as well. So it was kind of for me seeing a leader on the pitch, someone that I could resonate with as a leader, like someone who was emotionally invested in what they did, and that's kind of what I want to do. I'm with me the way I lead and the way I want to invoke my message on the world. Right, is all tied to emotion. Like I can't be myself, talk to people if I'm not emotionally invested in it,
Yeah.
in the work that I do, in the things that I want to achieve in my life. I need to be emotionally invested in it. So that's kind of where it stems from. Obviously, you spoke about like when you were a child and some of the things you used to think. I was like, oh, I can't wait to be Steven Gerrard and like this. I look when
That's
when
wicked.
when I look back at it, that's kind of why I was also inspired by it.
Is it?
That would be my first hero, the one that originally came to my mind.
Nice.
But obviously, parents, my mom
Mhm.
and dad, are massive
Yeah.
influence. They came to this a bit about me before we wrap up the episode. Both my parents came from Mauritius. They came to work in the NHS around the age of 19, 20, 21. And they've been that's where they met actually. They both met on the same sort of training program. And they had difficulties as well coming to this country, speaking English for the first time.
Mm.
Um, in the 90s where they lived in a pretty much all white community, being the only people of color in that community, the challenges that I had in itself. So they're also role models and heroes because they, you know,
They
they
lived it.
they lived it and they and
Yeah.
then now they're not just living, they're thriving, and they're being able to provide that inspiration to me and my siblings as well to kind of
Yeah.
continue, not just do what they did, but do better than them and
Yeah. Yeah.
make.
Yeah.
So that would be my sort of heroes close to me, if that makes sense.
I love that. Yeah.
Uh,
I love that.
but no, I love your question. I'll definitely ask my next guest
Thank you.
about heroes because I think that's a really important question to ask. Um, but Elliot, it's been an absolute honor to have you on the podcast. You've
Thank
been
you very much. An honor to
role
be here.
Your spoken word was amazing, your story, your inspiration. And if any young people or anyone in general wants to get in touch with Elliot, I'll leave his contacts, his website in the description so you can get in touch. I'm sure Elliot would love to hear your stories as well.
I'm looking
Um,
forward to it. So please do.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Elliot. And yeah, have an amazing rest of your day. And thank you so much for being on the
Let's both
podcast.
get some rest. See you later.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.